आपण डायल केलेला नंबर सध्या व्यस्त आहे.
सर शुरू करें, टाइम हो गया है.
कर दिए.
उनको बोलो इस पर.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम. हाँ, इरफान साहब, आप स्क्रीन शेयर करने के लिए सर हमें स्लाइड शो शेयर करना है.
स्क्रीन शेयर कर सकते हैं साहब?
हाँ जी, कर सकते हैं. ठीक, जी सर. जी सर, कर रहे हैं.
होस्ट डिसेबल्ड पार्टिसिपेंट स्क्रीन शेयरिंग, इनको को होस्ट कीजिए. आप को होस्ट बनाइए तो जब ये स्क्रीन शेयर कर पाएंगे, या फिर इनेबल कीजिए.
हाँ, अभी डिसेबल्ड है, स्क्रीन शेयरिंग डिसेबल्ड है.
एक मिनट सर.
जी 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 सर.
को होस्ट.
हो गया.
हाँ जी, शुरू हुई है. अस्सलाम वालेकुम.
विजिबल है क्या शेयरिंग? देखिए.
हाँ सर, विजिबल है सर, शेयरिंग विजिबल है. जी सर, स्लाइड शो दिख रहा है सर?
जी बिल्कुल सर, शुरू करें आप.
जी सर.
जी जी.
ओके.
I welcome Dr. R.R. Qadi, expert in education and management. He is a education and management consultant. Basically, he is an academician, but he has also experience of administration. He worked as Deputy Registrar, NM, University Jalgaon, and he is very active activist of the operation and protection work. So, since Mutawalli is the main person at the ground level who is involved in real management of the property, and I have requested him to talk on his functions. Thank you. Welcome, Qadi Sahib.
Thank you very much, sir. Okay, sir. Today, my topic is related with Indian Wakf Act provisions regarding regulation of various financial matters related to Wakf Board. In this context, we have got the syllabus and the contents which are going to see in this our presentation. Wakf Board to pay for default by Mutawalli, creation of Waqf Board Reserve Fund, extension of time by Waqf Board, penalties imposed by Waqf Board, Waqf Mutawalli not to spend for self-defense, budget of Waqf Board, audit of accounts of Waqf Board, state government to pass orders on auditor's report on Waqf Board, and Waqf Board to lend or borrow the money. As such, we are going to see the provisions incorporated in the Indian Waqf Act about powers of board to pay dues in case of default by Mutawalli. The Mutawallis are supposed to pay certain taxes, rents, etc. to various authorities, and in case they fail to do so, the Waqf Board can discharge this function on behalf of that Waqf from Waqf Fund, and it may recover the amount paid by the Waqf Board from the property of that particular Waqf, and may also recover damages up to the extent of 12.5% of the amount so paid, according to section 58. The another provision is related to any sum of money due under subsection 1 may, on a certificate issued by the board after giving the Mutawalli concerned an opportunity of being heard, be recovered in the same manner as an area of land revenue, which is unchallengeable, which is bound to be recovered in any circumstances. The creation of Waqf Board Reserve Fund. Section 59 states that for the purpose of making provisions for the payment of rent and revenue, cess, rates, etc. to various authorities, including government and local authority, for the discharge of expenses of the repair of the property and for preservation of the work property, the Waqf Board may direct the creation and maintenance in such manner as is think of a reserve fund from the income of Waqf Board. Next. Just a minute, sir. The Mutawallis are required to perform certain acts within a stipulated time, but in case they fail to do so, the board may extend the time limit according to section 60 if it thinks it fit. Penalties imposed by the board. Section 61 stipulates that if a Mutawalli fails to apply for the registration of the Waqf or Awqaf, if he fails to furnish statement of particulars of accounts or returns as required under this act, or if he fails to supply information or particulars as required by the board, as well as if he fails to allow inspection of a Waqf properties, accounts, records, or deeds and documents relating thereto, he shall be punishable with fine which may extend to 10,000 rupees for non-compliance of clauses A to D as mentioned above, unless and until he satisfies the court or the tribunal that there was reasonable cause for his failure. Next. Accordingly, section 61 stipulates that if a Mutawalli fails to deliver possession of any Waqf property, if ordered by the board or tribunal, or if he fails to carry out the directions of the board, or if he fails to discharge any public dues or do any other act which he is lawfully required to do so by or under this act, he shall be punishable with fine which may extend to, and in case of non-compliance of clauses E to H, Previously, we have seen A to H, but now the penalty is more serious with regard to the failure in respect of E to H. In such cases, he shall be punishable with imprisonment for a term which may extend to 6 months, and also with the fine which may extend to 10,000 rupees, unless and until he satisfies the court or the tribunal that there was reasonable ground for his failure. Penalties imposed now continue. Notwithstanding anything contained in section 1, if a mutawalli omits or fails with a view to concealing the existing of a Wakf to apply for its registration or after the commencement, either prior to commencement of this act or after the commencement of this act, or if a mutawalli furnishes any statement, written or information to the board which he knows or has reason to believe to be false, misleading, untrue, or incorrect in any material particular, he shall be punishable with imprisonment for a term which may extend to 6 months, and also with fine which may extend to 15,000 rupees. Next, no court shall take cognizance of an offense punishable under this act, except some exceptions. There are some levels of the court which can take cognizance of this means offenses under this act and fines and other things, penalties in this act. The fine imposed under section 1, when realized, shall be credited to the Wakf fund. It is related with the treatment of the amount means recovered on account of fine, and it should be credited to the Wakf fund. Another provision is related with in every case where offender is convicted after the commencement of this act of an offense punishable under subsection 1 and sentenced to fine, the court shall also impose such term of imprisonment in default of payment of fine as is authorized by law for such default, in addition to the provisions of Wakf Act. The another matter or topic is related with mutawalli is not supposed to spend any money belonging to Wakf for self-defense. That is to say, if some litigation is initiated against the mutawalli, he is not allowed to use the amount of Wakf fund for his own defense. The section 62 states that no mutawalli shall spend any money out of the funds of Wakf for which he is the mutawalli for meeting any costs, charges, or expenses which are or may be incurred by him in relation to any suit, appeal, or any other proceeding for or incidental to his removal from office or for taking any disciplinary action against himself. Now I have the basic topic allotted to me is related with the maintenance of accounts, audit, budget, etc. But for governing all these matters, the Act has not given any elaborated instruction, but the Act has empowered the state government. According to section 109, the state government may, by notification in the official gazette, make rules to carry out the purposes of this Act other than those chapter 3. In particular, and without prejudice to the generality of the foregoing powers, such rules may provide for all or any of the following matters, namely, section 10A subsection 2(9), the form in which and the time within which a separate budget for Awqaf under the direct management of the board shall be prepared under subsection 1 of section 45. Likewise, it also empowers the interval at which accounts of Awqaf may be audited in pursuance of the provisions of subsection 1 of section 47. It has also given powers to make rules according to section 109 subsection 219, the rate at which contribution is to be made by Mutawalli under section 72. Since the amount of contribution has got financial bearing, that's why we have considered all the indirect provisions which are directly or indirectly related with the income or expenditure, accounting, audit, or budget of the Wakf board. Next, 109 to 20, the payment of monies into the Wakf fund, the investment, the custody, and disbursement of such monies under section 77. The form in which and the time within which the budget of the board may be prepared and submitted under section 78. It means it empowers the state government to make provision for all such things, and accordingly the respective state governments used to frame various rules for regulation of these matters. And it is not the state government is required to get approval of the state legislatures, as the section 47, 40, 49, 44, 47 stipulates, and the section 111 states that every rule made under section 109 and every regulation made under section 110. Here, the difference we have to take into account, the rules are being framed by the state government, and the board is authorized to make regulation for carrying out various accounts, audit, budget related matters, and they can frame their own regulation. Means the rules are being framed by the state government, whereas the regulations are being framed by the respective Wakf boards. The section 110 shall be laid as soon as maybe after it is made before the state legislatures, but the consent and concurrence of the state legislature is required to be obtained for such rules and regulations. They are not at all free to frame the rules and regulations as per their own whims. The powers to make regulations by the board, as stated earlier, the Act empowers the various Awqaf boards to frame their own regulations for running of their administrative activities. Accordingly, section 110 stipulates that the board may, with previous sanction of the state government, make regulations not inconsistent with this act or the rules made by the state government in these provisions of this act for carrying out its functions under this act. Means both the state government as well as Awqaf boards have got certain parameters or channels as imposed by the provisions incorporated in Indian Wakf Act. In particular, and without prejudice to the generality of the foregoing powers, such regulations framed by the Awqaf may provide for all or any of the following matters. Section 110, subsection 2H, the form in which and the time within which the budgets of Awqaf may be prepared and submitted by the Mutawalli and approved by the board under subsection 1 of section 44. The powers and functions of the board, section 32 stipulates that subject to any rules that may be made under this act, the general superintendents of all Awqaf in a state shall vest in the board established or the state, and it shall be the duty of the board so to exercise its powers under this act as to ensure that the Wakf under its superintendents are properly maintained, controlled, and administered, and the income thereof is duly applied to the objects and for the purposes for which such Wakf were created or intended. Section 32, subsection 2 states that without prejudice to the generality of the following power, the functions of the board shall be to maintain a record containing information relating to the origin, income, object, and beneficiaries of every Wakf, to administer the Wakf fund. Every income is credited to the Wakf fund and it is administered by the Mutawalli for Wakf and the Wakf board for the state at the state level. The powers and functions of the board, section 32 subsection 2L, to call for such returns. The board is empowered to call for such returns, statistics, accounts, and other information from the Mutawallis with respect to the Wakf property as the board may from time to time require. It may inspect or cause inspection of Wakf properties, accounts, records, or deeds and documents relating thereto. The creation of reserve fund, section 59 stipulates that for the purpose of making provisions for the payment of rent and of revenue, cess, rates, and taxes due to the government or any other local authority, for the discharge of expenses of the repair of the Wakf property and for the preservation of the Wakf property, means for the general maintenance, general administration of the Wakf property, the board may direct the creation and maintenance in such manner as it think fit of a reserve fund from the income of a Wakf. Means for dealing with various matters, administrative matters, day-to-day expenses, one reserve fund is created to take care of these things. Next. Sorry. Anyway, assumption. Assumption. Anyway, of the Wakf. The Wakf board may, by a notification in the official gazette, assume direct management of the Wakf for such period or periods not exceeding 5 years in the aggregate, as may be specified in the notification. I have incorporated this provision with a view to know that the board is supposed to directly manage the affairs of the Wakf board. In that case, the Wakf board is empowered to take charge of that particular Wakf, and it is supposed to take care of audit, accounts, and other requirements of that. Okay. Annual contribution payable to board. Annual contribution is also a financial matter, and it is a source of income for the board. And section 2 subsection 1 stipulates that the Mutawalli of a Wakf, the net annual income of which is not less than 5,000 rupees, shall pay annually out of the net annual income derived by the Wakf such contributions not exceeding 7% of such annual income as may be prescribed to the board for the services rendered by such board to the Wakf. It is the mechanism. It is the mechanism for self-reliance of the board. Wakf fund. as told earlier, Wakf fund is a source of means expenditure, income and expenditure are being incorporated in Wakf fund. Section 77 stipulates that the Wakf fund, all monies received or realized by the board under this act and all other monies received as donations, benefactions or grants by the board shall form a fund to be called Wakf fund. Subsection 2 of section 77 stipulates that all monies received by the board as donations, benefactions and grants shall be deposited and accounted for under a separate subhead. Means there should be some identity for each and every head of income as well as expenditure. Subsection 3 of section 77 stipulates that subject to any rules that may be made by the state government in this behalf, the Wakf fund shall be under the control of the board. So, however, that the Wakf fund under the control of common Wakf board shall be subject to rules, if any, made in this behalf by the central government. Means the Wakf board is simultaneously controlled or directed by the central government as well as state government, and if any made in this behalf by the central government. The Wakf fund shall be applied to repayment of any loan incurred under section 75 and payment of interest thereon. Means the concerned repay the amount from the amount generated through the Wakf fund. Subsection 4b of section 77 stipulates that payment of the cost of audit of the Wakf fund and the accounts of Wakf may be incurred from Wakf fund. Accordingly, the payment of the salary and allowances to the officers and staff of the board can be incurred from Wakf fund. Payment of traveling allowances to the chairperson, members of the board can be incurred from the Wakf fund. Payment of all expenses incurred by the board in the performance of the duties imposed and the exercise of the powers conferred by or under this act can also be incurred. Subsection 4f of section 77 stipulates that the payment of all expenses incurred by the board for the discharge of any obligation imposed on it by or under any law for the time being in force, it can also be applied for that purposes. G stipulates that the payment of maintenance to Muslim women as ordered by a court of competent jurisdiction under the provisions of the Muslim Women Protection of Rights on Divorce Act 1986 is also supposed to be incurred from Wakf fund. The subsection 5 of section 77 stipulates that if any balance remains after meeting the expenditure referred to in subsection 4, the board may use any portion of such balance for the preservation and protection of Wakf properties or for such other purposes as it may deem fit. The subpoints given at the end are related with various amendments made by the respective government or the respective statutory authorities to various provisions of this act. The section 78 subsection 1 stipulates that the board shall in every year prepare in such form and at such time. We will see what is the exact form of that budget, accounts, etc. We will show. I have already incorporated all the formats required to be incorporated in this. Means in this presentation also I have tried to incorporate various means the forms being used for accounts and budget purposes. The board shall in every year prepare in such form and at such time as may be prescribed a budget for the next financial year, showing the estimated receipts and expenditure during that financial year, and forward a copy of the same to the state government. Before commencement of every financial year, the Wakf board is required to estimate of various income and expenditure of the next financial year, and they are required to prepare their own budget and are required to submit the same to the state government. The budget of Wakf board. Section 78 subsection 2 stipulates that on receipt of the budget forwarded to it under subsection 1, means the concerned Wakf board prepares the budget and submits it to state government as per 78(1). The state government, after receiving the same, shall examine the budget and shall suggest such alterations, corrections, or modifications to be made therein as it may think fit, and forward such suggestions to the board for its consideration. Subsection 3 of section 78 stipulates that on receipt of the suggestions from the state government, the board may make written representations to that government with regard to the alterations, corrections, or modifications suggested by that government, and the state government shall, after considering such representations, communicate within a period of 3 weeks from the date of receipt thereof to the board its final decision in relation to the matter, and the decision of the state government shall be final. There is no challenge to the ultimate decision taken by the state government in this regard. Section 78 subsection 4 stipulates that on receipt of decision of the state government under subsection 3, as stated earlier, the board shall incorporate in its budget all the alterations, corrections, modifications finally suggested by the state government, and the budget as so altered after taking into consideration various factors incorporated or suggested by the government. The altered, corrected, or modified budget shall be the budget which shall be passed by the board. Means the initial budget prepared by the concerned Wakf board is semi-final, and which is subject to the concurrence or approval of the state government, and after getting approval of the state government, it is being considered as an approved budget, according to which the Wakf board are authorized to administer financial matters. Just a minute. Mine? Just a minute.
लॉगिन का प्रॉब्लम आ रहा है 2 मिनट होल्ड कीजिए क्या प्रॉब्लम
yes native is log ठीक है anyway section 45 subsection 1 stipulates that the chief executive officer shall prepare in such form and at such time as may be prescribed a budget in respect of the financial year next, and showing the estimated receipts and expenditure for each of the work of under the direct management of the board. Means the chief executive officer of the board is supposed to prepare the budget for board itself and also for the Wakf which are under its direct control, in which showing therein the estimated receipts and expenditure and submit it to the board for its approval. Section 45 stipulates that while submitting the budget under subsection 1, the chief executive officer shall also prepare statement giving details of the increase, if any, in the income of each Wakf under the direct management of the board, and the steps which have been taken for its better management and the results accruing therefrom during the year. It is a universal practice that while preparing the budget, we have to take cognizance of any increase or decrease in the income or expenditure, and the respective budget making authority is required to provide justification for any increase or decrease in the income or expenditure. Subsection 3 of Section 45 stipulates that the CEO shall keep regular accounts and be responsible for the proper management of every work under the direct management of the board, as stated earlier. Every budget submitted by the CEO under subsection 1 shall comply with the requirements of Section 46, and for this purpose, references therein to the mutawalli of the work shall be construed as references to the CEO. Section 45 stipulates that the audit of accounts of every work under the direct management of the board shall be undertaken by the state examiner of local funds, means the checking authority of the budget prepared by CEO for the Wakf which are under direct management of the board. The checking authority shall be the state examiner of local funds or any other officer appointed by the state government for this purpose, irrespective of the income of the Wakf. Subsection 6, Section 45 stipulates that the provisions of subsections 2 and 3 of Section 47 and the provisions of Section 48 and 49 shall, insofar as they are not inconsistent with the provisions of this section, apply to the audit of accounts referred to in this section. Where any work is under the direct management of the board, such administrative charges as may be specified by the CEO shall be payable by the Wakf to the board. Means even though the Wakf board is undertaking or looking after the administrative causes of that particular board, they are not incurring that expenditure from their own board fund, but they are supposed to recover that amount from the amount of that, from the income of that particular Wakf for which they are managing the activities. Section 47 and subsection 7 stipulate that provided that the chief executive officer shall not collect more than 10% of the gross annual income of the Wakf under the direct management of the board as administrative charges. Means there is restriction on the part of board to means the limit its expenses to the extent of maximum 10% of the total income of that particular Wakf. Here is the provision with regard to the budget. The Act states that a budget showing the estimated receipts and expenditure for a period of 12 months ending with 31st day of March, which is the financial year of the next year, in form number 3. They have given the stipulated form pro forma in which the budget is required to be prepared. Form number 3 of the schedule shall be prepared by the mutawallis and submitted to the board before 31st December of every preceding year for its approval. The accounts and budgets of the concerned affiliated registered Wakf Awqaf are the source of income for the state budget. I mean, that I think state Wakf board. This is the form number 3 in which they have shown that the estimate for the year ending so and so, statement showing the estimated receipts in which the head of accounts and budget estimated. They have given opening balance at the beginning. They have shown the opening balance of cash, current account with any balance with any bank, value of grain or other articles on hand, and total opening balance, receipts in the form of lands, cash income from leases, income in kind in the shape of paddy and other grains. Next page. The sale proceed of paddy, income from other sources, rent from buildings, grants, grant contributions, income from investments, interest from loan, interest from deposit, miscellaneous other incomes, grand total of receipts. The receipt part of the budget has been ended over here, and the other part shows the heads of accounts related with the various expenditures. It shows the establishment cost for which in which establishment means the amount paid for payment salaries of officers of establishment and traveling allowance and other allowances, contingencies, miscellaneous, ordinary expenses, expenditure, other expenditure, if any, total, festival and periodical festivals, total expenditures, we are bound to celebrate some national and other festivals, and that amount is required to be shown in this head. Lands, cultivation charges, minor repairs, total expenditure on hand, and buildings, minor repairs, taxes, revenue assessment, municipal or local fund assessment, license fee, etc. Total expenditure on taxes. These are the subheads. That total amount is being taken in the last column. Contribution to the Wakf board, that is up to the 7% or whatever it may be. Miscellaneous, grand total of expenditure, closing balances. At the beginning, we have seen the opening balances of cash, current accounts, and at the end, we have to show the closing balances of cash, current accounts, value of grains and other articles on hand, total closing balances, and accounts of the board. Means budget is a track on which the budget is a track for the administrative or financial journey of that particular board, be it a Wakf or be it a Wakf board. The budget is a railway track on which they both have to run their vehicle, and section 79 stipulates that the board shall cause to be maintained. Budget is a prerequisite for accounts, and as per the heads of income and expenditure entitled in the budget, the accounts are being regulated in that on that basis. The board shall causes to be maintained such books of account and other books in relation to its accounts in such form and in such manner as may be provided by the regulations. Means the board is supposed to form its own regulations for maintenance of various accounts. Here we can see, I think you can tell me whether I am running too fast or whether I have to stop or minimize my speed, because some
It's all right. It's all right.
Oh, sir. Okay, sir.
It's all right.
Okay, sir. Here we have already seen the provisions regarding to the empowerment of the source of authority for means regulation or rules being framed by the state government. Regulations are being framed by the concerned Wakf board, and the procedure for receipt and payment of money relating to the funds of the board. The section 14 stipulates that for all monies received on behalf of the board, receipt shall be given in Form A. Receipt, particular receipt, hand receipt or means computerized receipt, the form of the receipt shall be in Form A by the officer authorized by the CEO in this behalf as laid down in rules made under Section 109 of the Wakf Act 1995. The receipt to be issued will be computer generated. They will be numbered consecutively, machine numbered or computerized numbers. The remitter's signature shall also be taken in the computer copy when presented in person. They are supposed to take means acknowledgement of that particular remitter. All monies received by the authorized officer in his capacity as such shall be brought into account as soon as they are received. Means it is the duty of the concerned clerical or administrative or accounting staff to remit that account into its own account as soon as possible. All money orders may be acknowledged by the officer authorized, cashier or some other person. The amount so received shall be entered in the register of receipts prescribed in the rules made under Section 109 of the Wakf Act 1995, and in the software also the entries in this register shall be made in the order of receipts. The various receipt books, the amount received through various receipts and through receipt books are required to be entered in the register of receipt, which will be a summary of receipt for a particular day or for a particular period. Next provision, number 6, the register of receipts will be closed at 5 p.m. on every working day, and the daily total carried to the cash book. Means receipt book is different than cash book. Cash book is called day book. the receipt deals with the matters of receipts only, whereas the cash book deals with the matters of receipts as well as expenses, payments. That as such, the receipt will be incorporated in the cash book referred to in rules. The register of receipts after being totaled daily will be submitted along with the counterfiles of receipts. Means carbon copies or second copies of the receipts to the authorized officer, who will verify the entries and initial them. The respective clerk who has received that amount through various means receipt books is supposed to incorporate their notings in the register of receipts, and will have to submit both the them means the register as well as the receipt book to the concerned officer for his checking. He will go through all the contents, and after that he will check and initiate the same. At the close of every month, the entries in the cash book shall be reconciled with the statement of receipts and expenditure received from the bank, in which the funds of the board are lodged, and discrepancies, if any, shall be brought to the notice of the bank immediately, and steps shall be taken to correct errors, if any. Because the Wakf board staff are required to remit the amount received immediately to the bank account, and the bank account entries and the day-to-day accounts of the Wakf board or Wakf as may be must be matched. And if there is any match at the time of reconciliation of monthly transaction, if there is any match, if some amount is not if some amount is not remitted, or if some amount is remitted in excess of the record, it should be reconciled, and necessary rectification is required to be made in this regard. All the amounts received before the bank time shall be deposited in the bank on the same day. Amounts received after the bank time shall be remitted on the next working day. No money received on behalf of the board shall be appropriated or utilized for expenditure without first being brought into account and remitted to the bank. It is not allowed that you have received some amount immediately, and if you are required to do some expenditure, incur some expenditure, you are not entitled to expend that amount without taking note of that transaction, receipt transaction in the receipt register. The authorized officer shall examine frequently the entries in the register of receipts and cash book and bank challenge, and shall satisfy himself that all the amounts received have been remitted to the bank. It is the duty of that particular supervisory officer. The payment of the claims. For the day-to-day purposes, some TA bills are required to be paid, some fuel charges or any administrative charges. It is a kind of day-to-day expenditure, and for regulation of such types of expenses, the provisions are that all the payments out of the Wakf fund in respect of bills presented to the board shall be made only after the claims duly scrutinized and passed by the CEO. Unless and until the CEO passes that expenditure, it cannot be debited to the Wakf fund, save an exception, save as provided in the rules relating to the incurring of petty contingent expenditures, day-to-day petty contingent expenditures from the permanent advance. Payment shall be made only by check drawn on the bank in which the funds of the board are part. Some petty amount are being paid to some responsible persons for taking cognizance of day-to-day expenditures, and they can incur that expenditure because they are authorized to incur a particular quantum of amount for day-to-day purposes. Every payment order shall be signed, voucher. We can take payment order, or you can tell voucher also. Every payment order shall be signed by the authorized officer. The payment order shall also mention whether it is by check or by cash or by online payment through the bank account maintained by the board. If the claim is paid out of interest, interest means the amount of advance paid to a particular authority. If the claim is paid out of interest, the bills shall be stamped with the words paid in cash. When the payment is made, and if the claim is paid by check, the bill shall be stamped paid by check number so and so, dated so and so, in conspicuous type. In the latter case, means in the case of check payment, the amount shall be entered as soon as the check is signed in the appropriate column of the payment register of the board. Means two columns are there. For cash expenses, the separate column is there, and for check expenses, the separate column is there. And as soon as it is signed by the respective signing authority, it should be incorporated in the column provided for the check payment details. Every payment made either in cash or by check shall be supported by a voucher duly receipted or with printed receipt. In case of online payment, stamped if any, if the amount exceeds rupees, if the amount of payment exceeds rupees 5,000 in accordance with Indian Stamp Act, the recipient is supposed to sign it, and signed by the person to whom the money is due and to whom it has actually been paid. All claims which are preferred and accepted shall be paid at the earliest possible date. All the claims which are preferred and accepted shall be paid at the earliest possible date. They should not be withheld, because withholding of something means paves the ways for corruption. Sir, please, हमारा पेमेंट कर दीजिए, हमारा पेमेंट आपके पास पेंडिंग है, फिर हमको कुछ मिलेगा, चाय पानी, nothing doing. All claims which are preferred and accepted shall be paid at the earliest possible date. Every item of expenditure shall be through bills in one of the following kinds, as prescribed in the Kerala Treasury Code. These rules have been prepared by the Kerala Wakf Board, and they, as I have told earlier, means they have very properly they have prepared. That's why I have taken as an example of regulation of income and expenditure. The salary bill, every item of expenditure shall be through bills. The bill should be initiated. It should not be like anything. Some bills are required to be salary bill for the payment of salary of CEO, etc., staff member, establishment pay bill for the payment of members of the establishment, TA bill. There should be some prescribed pro forma of TA bill also for the members of the gazetted, non-gazetted establishment of the board, TA bill of the chairperson and members of the board, contingent bill for all the contingent charges incurred from the interest. Work bill for all public, means work bill is related with the building and maintenance expenses. Each bill shall ordinarily contain only claims for charges to be taken against one of the major budget heads. There are three kinds of budget heads: major budget heads, minor budget heads, and detailed budget heads. If in any case a bill be presented which contains charges against more than one head, the cashier shall write in red ink on the bill itself above the payment order details of charges according to the budget heads. Because streamlining of financial transaction is very essential. The man going to pay must ensure that the bill which has been submitted before him is authorized expenditure in the light of provisions made in the budget, and if there is any provision in the budget, then only he can pass that bill. If any head of the account which has been mentioned on the bill contradicts with the authorized head of account as stipulated in the budget, the cashier or the concerned person is required to rectify it in the reading, and the accounting procedure actually starts from selection of proper head. If the proper heads of account is selected for receipt and payment, the health of accounting will be good. Otherwise, there will be problem, and that's why it is very clear for all the persons that the accounting has got three rules: personal account, real account, and nominal account. Three kinds of accounts are there. Personal account, the rule states that these are the very universal and fundamental rule of a double entry book system: debit the receiver and credit the giver. This is the rule for personal transaction. Debit the receiver. The account of receiver will be debited and the account of payer will be credited. This is debit the receiver, credit the giver. Real account is related with any kind of material in cash or kind in the sense of material. Real account states that debit what comes in, credit what goes out, and the third principle of nominal account means that in case of real, some goods are means involved. In case of person, two persons are involved. But in case of nominal means a non-tangible. The nominal account states that debit the expenses and losses. Nominal account states that debit the expenses and losses, credit the gains and income and profit. Whatever income and expenditure are there in the kind of means bonus or demerit charges, which are not means directly related. It is a kind of loss. Debit the expenses and losses, credit the gains and income and profit. And I thought it proper to means elaborate this fact because it is related with the streamlining of the accounting means of expenditure and income. All bills or vouchers that have been paid shall be numbered consecutively for a year. Means as soon as new financial year starts, the voucher which has been paid first 1/21/22, 1/2/21/22, whatever it may be. All bills or vouchers have been paid shall be numbered consecutively for a year in the order of payments and shall be stamped paid or cancelled as the case may be and filled carefully for checks and audit. Means it must be cancelled. A bill paid by us either by cash or through check must be cancelled, and no, it should not, that document should not be used for another claiming. Sub vouchers for payment from imprest shall be filled separately and shall be attached to the voucher for recoupment. The persons who have taken advance for meeting with the expenditure of particular department is supposed to submit various bills submitted to him by the other persons, and he has to collect all the bills of his department, and he will have to submit all the bills to the cash department of the work board for recoupment of that amount. Suppose the work board has paid rupees 10,000 to him as an imprest. He will expend that amount by taking various means vouchers, and he will expend that amount based on the passing of that vouchers, and after passing the said, he will 10,000 bills will be submitted to the board, and the board will pay back or recoup 10,000 rupees for him for further expenditures. All the payments shall be entered in the register of payment. As told earlier, the register of receipt is different and the register of payment is different. All the payments shall be entered in the register of payment prescribed in the rules, and entries in it shall be attested by the authorized officer on the next working day. The concerned person, otherwise there should be watch on the expenditure incurred, otherwise somebody may misuse and some fictitious kind of expenditure may be booked, and there may be a scope of corruption. That's why the respective supervisory officer is required to check yesterday's all the bills and vouchers. The daily totals of the payment shall be struck in the register on payments and carried over to the appropriate column in the cash book. As I told, the day-to-day receipt bill is there, day-to-day receipt register is there, as well as day-to-day payment register is there, and the total of daily expenditure of a particular day shall be shown in the cash book. The cash book will show only one entry, the details of various expenditure incurred or the details of various income accrued on that particular day will be shown in the receipt and payment account. in order to facilitate the check of monthly bills or recurring charges such as establishment house rent and permanent traveling allowance and permanent conveyance allowance, if any, and audit register shall be maintained in the board of office. The CEO may authorize. Is there anything wrong? Please unmute. Please mute. Somebody has, I think, open. Okay. In order to facilitate the check of monthly bills or recurring charges such as establishment house rent, permanent building allowance, and permanent conveyance allowance, if any, an audit register shall be maintained in the board office. The CEO may authorize a permanent advance not exceeding rupees 5,000 to the administrative cum accounts officer or divisional work officer. Explained earlier. All claims not exceeding 500 shall be paid from the impressed. Means there is a limit. Miscellaneous times of expenditure up to the extent of rupees 500 are supposed to be incurred through the impressed or advance amount which has been given to the respective responsible officer of the respective budget or head of the department. On granting an imprest by administrative cum accounts officer or divisional work officers for the payment of petty charges, the holder shall be required to sign and file an acknowledgement in the form I acknowledge to have in my possession a permanent advance of rupees 5,000, which sum is due from me to the board, and I am personally accountable for the amount. A similar acknowledgement shall also be given by the holder on the first working day of each financial year. Means the impressed holder are required to submit the statement that that amount is in our possession and I am personally responsible for the payment. The administrative accounts officer or the divisional work officers shall make payments from his permanent advance from time to time as required, and for each payment he shall obtain and hold a voucher received from the payee. The voucher is the authority which justifies the expenditure. If you will lose the voucher, you are not in a position to claim that amount from the board. That's why they carry very care in preserving the bills and vouchers. These vouchers shall be known as sub-vouchers, means the vouchers collected by the impressed holder are being called as sub-vouchers and shall be numbered consecutively stamped, paid in cash, because they have got cash with them, and the expenditure up to 500 or so are supposed to be incurred by them, and they should stamp on the sub-vouchers that paid in cash and entered in the impressed register. Means it is another kind of register. One is a receipt register, payment register, cash register, and it is impressed register. Impressed register is maintained for showing the details about the advance taken by the work board for carrying out particular expenditure of a particular department or division. Sorry. No check shall ordinarily be signed unless request for immediate delivery to the person to whom the money is to be paid. The practice of retaining signed check in the office should not be permitted at all, except under very special circumstances, which should be recorded in writing. Every check shall be drawn in favor of the person to whom the money is actually to be paid. But in regard to pay and allowances and TA to the employees of the board, the check may be drawn in favor of the cashier, and in the absence of cashier, in favor of any person acting on this behalf or the nominee of the CEO. The amount of every check drawn shall be written in words as well as in figures, both on the checks and the counterfoils, and the counterfoils shall be initialed by the person signing the check. When a signed check is cancelled, it shall be enfaced or stamped cancelled by the authorized officer and shall be destroyed as soon as accounts for the month in which the check was drawn have been audited. The fact of the cancellation shall be noted in the red ink under the signature of the drawing officer. If the check is cancelled before the cash transaction of the month in which it was issued have been totaled, the entry in the cash book and also in the register of payments shall be struck out in red ink under the initials of the authorized officer to facilitate the reconciliation. If, however, the cash transactions of the month have already been totaled and struck, minus entries shall be made in the payment just below the totals of the head to which it was originally charged in the accounts of the month. The corresponding entries will be made in the cash book also. The monthly closing of accounts. The transactions incorporated in various register of receipts and payment shall be totaled every month, and the correctness of the grand totals of the different heads of receipts and expenditures shall be compared to the administrative cum accounts officer or the divisional work board with the totals of the receipt and payments in the cash book. The accounts of every month shall be unstable. The accounts of every month shall be closed before the 10th day of the succeeding month, and an abstract of receipts and expenditure shall be prepared. A copy of it will be filed along with the vouchers of the month, and another copy will be forwarded to the CEO. It is the procedure for monthly compilation of accounts, and after that, after completion of all the monthly accounts, the annual accounts are being totaled in such a way. A classified abstract of receipt and expenditure of every month shall be placed. The abstract means the summary of the receipt and expenditure of every month shall be placed before the board at its meeting held after the close of the month and got approved by the board. The fact of approval of the classified abstract shall be recorded in minutes book, and a copy of the approved abstract shall be filed with the vouchers of the month to which the abstract relates. A register of recoveries shall be maintained by the administrative cum accounts officer or divisional work officers. This register shall be verified, means the register of recoveries shall be verified once in a month by the administrative cum accounts officer or the divisional work officers, and once in 6 months by the CEO. In all matters relating to accounting and finance of the board, the officers in charge for accounting will function as a financial assistant to the administrative cum accounts officer. He will check all the receipts and payments and initial the appropriate registers and vouchers mentioned in the regulations above before they are presented to the administrative cum accounts officer. The administrative cum accounts officer will satisfy himself that the financial assistant has initialed all the payment vouchers in token for verification of payment payment before payment. Audit of accounts of work board. The accounting procedure starts with budget. After approval of budget, the income and expenditure are regulated and shown in the form of accounting, various types of accounts and registers, and whether this accounting is proper or not, it is being looked after by the audit. The audit of accounts of work board, section 80 subsection 1 states that the accounts of the board shall be audited and examined annually by such auditor as may be appointed by the state government. Subsection 2 stipulates that the auditor shall submit his report to the state government, and the report of the auditor shall, among other things, specify whether the accounts of every Wakf under the direct management of the board have been kept separately, and whether such accounts have been audited annually by the state examiner or of the local funds. Means he has to ensure that in addition to the accounts of the Wakf board, the accounts of the Wakf direct under the management of Wakf are also up to date and they have also been got examined by the competent authority as stipulated in the Act. Audit of accounts, continue. Subsection 2 of section 80 states that and shall also specify all cases of irregular, illegal or improper expenditure not commensurate with budget or anything, unauthorized expenditure, or of failure to recover money, because recovering money is to take care of our income. If there is failure to recover money or other property caused by neglect or misconduct and any other matter which the auditor considers it necessary to report, and the report shall also contain the same of the name of any person who in the opinion of the auditor is responsible for such expenditure or failure, and the auditor shall in every such case certify the amount of such expenditure or loss as due from such person, to be recovered. Audit of accounts of Wakf Board section, the cost of the audit shall be paid from the Wakf fund, be it the Wakf fund of the particular Wakf or be it the Wakf fund of the Wakf Board. Section 81 states that the report of the auditor is required to be presented to the state government. The state government shall examine the auditor's report and may call for the, it is a kind of control. On each and every stage, there is a mechanism of control. Nobody is independent. Nobody can use his own whims for maintenance of accounts and audit. The state government shall examine the auditor's report and may call for the explanation of any person in regard to any matter mentioned in the report of auditor, and shall pass such orders on the report as it thinks fit. And a copy of the said auditor's report along with orders of the government shall be forwarded by the state government to the council, means the Wakf council, within a period of 30 days of laying of such a report before such house of state legislature, where it consists of 2 houses or where such legislatures consist of 1 house before that house. Means there is huge mechanism of control about the stopping of the chances of misuse of the Wakf properties and Wakf cash. Section 75 deals with the powers of board to lend or borrow the money. The subsection 1 of section 75 stipulates that for the purposes of giving effect to the provisions of this act, the board may, with the previous sanction of the state government, borrow such sum of money and on such terms and conditions as the state government may determine. Means for borrowing any money, the respective board is required to take prior permission from the respective state government. The board shall repay the money borrowed together with any interest or cost due in respect thereof according to the terms and conditions of the loan. He is supposed to, I think it is over. I think it is over. Okay, thanks for your patience listening. I have tried to collect relevant information and question answer. I think some
Chat
I
box.
will chat. I was not in a position to go through the chat, and I will try to see what the questions have been inspection and taking for which check
पहला
by the exit.
2 मिनट
Work
ये
board.
पहला
Yes, please. Sorry. One. When we put up the work board question under action points mainly on those who year to year do not file accounts, do not pay tax. Yes, sir.
Hello.
Sir, yes, sir, yes, sir. I have taken cognizance of the RTI, and sir, in the light of all these provisions, you can directly incorporate the provisions of various with regard to the regulation of financial matters. While yes, sir, sir, please. I have.
कुछ question हो जाए?
Yes, sir.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Questions हैं कुछ?
हाँ सर,
इरफान साहब,
हाँ
जी सर साहब,
मोहतरम
क्वेश्चन थे, कुछ
अकरम,
2-4 क्वेश्चन ले ले।
हाँ ले रहा हूँ सर।
जी
जी सर। हाँ सर, देखिए मैं अकरमुल जब्बार साहब ने मतलब एक जो क्वेश्चन किया है सर, कि मतलब जो मतलब ये मैं पढ़ के दिखाता हूँ आपको ताकि क्लियर हो जाए। पर्पस वुड बी सर्व व्हेन वी पुट द वक्फ बोर्ड टू क्वेश्चन अंडर आरटीआई relating to action taken on these points, mainly on those who year to year do not file accounts, do not means they have rightly observed, do not pay tax, etc. Honorable Akramul Jabbar Saab has already, means he has got too much experience in audit and analysis of various aspects related to functioning of Waqf board, and he has rightly pointed out that such types of faults may be brought to the notice, and the information may be asked in the lights of various provisions incorporated with regard to the maintenance of budget, means accounts, etc. वक्फ बोर्ड के डायरेक्ट मैनेजमेंट की हर तरफ वक्फ इंस्टीट्यूट का अलग बजट सीईओ ने तैयार करना चाहिए, या जितने भी वक्फ इंस्टीट्यूट वक्फ बोर्ड के डायरेक्ट मैनेजमेंट में है उनका कंबाइंड बजट करना चाहिए। तो ये तो इसके अंदर जैसा भी दिखाई देता है कि इसके अंदर जैसा कि वो ऑडिटर के वक्फ रिपोर्ट में आता है कि वक्फ बोर्ड ने अपना खुद का एक मतलब जो अकाउंट पूरा तैयार किया है, और उसी के साथ साथ जो उनके डायरेक्ट मैनेजमेंट में है, क्योंकि हर वक्फ का आइडेंटिटी अलग अलग है, हर वक्फ के जिम्मेदार अलग अलग है, इसलिए हर वक्फ का अलग अलग मतलब अकाउंट मेंटेन करना चाहिए, क्योंकि हर जो वक्फ होता है एफिलिएट उसके इनकम अलग अलग है, और उसके मुताबिक उसका जो 10% तक जो उसका एक्सपेंडिचर उसको लेना है। इसलिए मतलब जो है उसके जो वक्फ बोर्ड ने हर किसी का जो चाहे एक से ज्यादा भी अगर उनके पास रहे वक्फ डायरेक्ट मैनेजमेंट में, तो उन्होंने उनके लिए अलग अलग मतलब वो तैयार करना चाहिए, कंबाइंड नहीं बना सकते। एनीवे, हाँ क्या चंदा से, हाँ क्या पैसा चंदा से क्या
राशिद अंसारी के कुछ सवाल हैं।
जी सर,
राशिद अंसारी साहब के कुछ सवाल हैं।
जी जी, यहाँ पर कहाँ है 7% देने को कहा गया है, वो मैं एग्री के 7% देना चाहिए अपने इनकम से, ताकि मतलब वक्फ बोर्ड की भी अपनी सोर्स ऑफ इनकम बढ़ जाए, वो अपने ज्यादा से ज्यादा अच्छे तरीके से चलाने के लिए ज्यादा से ज्यादा हमारे वक्फ के जितने लोग हैं उन्होंने अपनी इनकम ज्यादा से ज्यादा बढ़ाना चाहिए, उसको शो करना चाहिए। बहुत सारे लोगों का नजरिया ये होता है कि भाई हम ज्यादा इनकम दिखा देंगे तो हमको प्रॉब्लम आएगा, इसलिए वो कम से कम इनकम दिखाने की एक टेंडेंसी होती है, और जो हमारे वक्फ बोर्ड को कमजोर करने के लिए जिम्मेदारी है ये टेंडेंसी। हाँ जी,
आंसर टाइप करके
इरफान साहब, राशिद अंसारी साहब के कुछ सवाल हैं।
जी
जी
काजी साहब, मैं पढ़ के बता देता हूँ।
हाँ
डॉक्टर
सर,
साहब,
हाँ सर,
पढ़ के सुना।
हाँ सर,
राशिद अंसारी साहब पूछ रहे हैं, कैन ए वक्फ बोर्ड एक्ट एज जुडिशियल बॉडी एंड पनिश ए मुतवल्ली डायरेक्टली फॉर हिज/हर ओमिशन और कमीशन व्हिच आर अगेंस्ट द ऑब्जेक्टिव ऑफ द वक्फ?
देखिए, हाँ देखिए, हाँ मतलब कैन ए वक्फ बोर्ड एक्ट एज जुडिशियल बॉडी एंड पनिश अ मुतवल्ली डायरेक्टली फॉर हिज और हर ओमिशन और कमीशंस व्हिच आर अगेंस्ट द ऑब्जेक्टिव्स ऑफ द वक्फ? बहुत अच्छा, बहुत यानी काफी अच्छा सवाल है ये लीगल पर्सपेक्टिव पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू, लेकिन मेरे ख्याल से इनके खिलाफ जो एक्शन लेने की जो है ना, ये पावर ऑफ वक्फ बोर्ड अगेंस्ट मतलब जो एफिलिएटेड वक्फ का है। तो अभी फिलहाल मैं इस लाइन से तो आपको मैं कह नहीं सकता, क्योंकि ये लीगल मैटर है, और मैंने अभी स्टडी जो किया हूँ वो सिर्फ मैंने फाइनेंशियल मैटर्स से रिलेटेड ही किया हूँ, इसलिए मेरा अंदाजन कुछ कह देना कि भाई वो ले सकते हैं या नहीं ले सकते हैं। तो इसके अंदर तो देखिए, लेकिन एक बात ये है कि हर किसी के ऊपर जो एक्शन लेने की जो पावर है, वो प्रोविजन जो है मुतवल्ली ने क्या करना चाहिए और नहीं करना चाहिए, इसके रेगुलेशन वक्फ बोर्ड ने नहीं दिया है, वो एक्ट ने दिया है। जब एक्ट ने दिया है वो प्रोविजंस, तो एक्ट के मुताबिक हुआ या नहीं, ये कॉमन सेंस पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू जो लीगल मैटर है, इट विल बी डिटरमाइंड बाय द रिस्पेक्टिव लेवल ऑफ कोर्ट्स, इन माय हम्बल ओपिनियन। आई एम नॉट मास्टर ऑफ दैट थिंग, बट मेरे ख्याल से चूंकि वो एक्ट की प्रोविजन है, और एक्ट में जितना पावर दिया गया है वक्फ बोर्ड को, वो उसके बाहर जा नहीं सकता है। अगर वक्फ बोर्ड ने उनको दिया है कुछ पावर, तो वो उसका इस्तेमाल कर सकते हैं, जो मेरे मतलब टॉपिक से हट करे फिलहाल।
एक फाइनेंस पे एक क्वेश्चन है
सर।
राशिद अंसारी का
सर।
कि मुतवल्ली ने अपनी मदर की बीमारी के इलाज के लिए 1 लाख रुपया खर्च कर डाला,
हाँ।
तो इसका और बोर्ड को नोटिस भी नहीं दिया, तो इस पे क्या हो सकता है, कैसे रिकवरी हो सकती है, कुछ कैसे एक्शन लिया जा सकता है?
100% देखिए साहब, जो अपने प्रोविजंस अपन ने देखे हैं कि वो अपने लिटिगेशन में डिफेंस के लिए भी वक्फ का पैसा जब इस्तेमाल नहीं कर सकता है, तो माँ की तबीयत के लिए खर्च करने का कोई सवाल ही नहीं आता सर। कि जब उसके खिलाफ वो वक्फ प्रॉपर्टी का, वक्फ पैसे का किसी भी जाती तौर पर वो इस्तेमाल कर ही नहीं सकता साहब, और वो बिल्कुल कॉग्निजेबल ऑफेंस है सर। जी, एब्सोल्युटली करेक्ट जी।
लास्ट क्वेश्चन कर लीजिए, बस खत्म, क्लोज किया जाए।
ओके सर, थैंक यू।
Who has the authority to approve the वक्फ बोर्ड्स बजट?
कौन सर?
वक्फ बोर्ड का बजट अप्रूव करने की कौन अथॉरिटी है?
हाँ, तो स्टेट गवर्नमेंट है साहब। वक्फ बोर्ड की जो है ना अथॉरिटी स्टेट गवर्नमेंट है। वक्फ बोर्ड का मैंने जैसा बताया कि वक्फ बोर्ड जो बजट तैयार करता है वो सेमीफाइनल होता है, और मतलब वो फाइनल सेमीफाइनल करने के बाद स्टेट गवर्नमेंट को देता है। स्टेट गवर्नमेंट उसके अंदर कुछ सजेशन, करेक्शन, मॉडिफिकेशन करने का विद इन 3 वीक्स वो उनको बताते हैं। फिर वो वापस आता है बजट सीईओ के पास। फिर बजट के अंदर उस मुताबिक करेक्शन, मॉडिफिकेशन किए जाते हैं, सजेशंस को इनकॉर्पोरेट किया जाता है, और उसके बाद फिर वो रिसबमिट किया जाता है स्टेट गवर्नमेंट को। तो उस मुताबिक जो भी है कि मतलब जो अल्टीमेट फाइनल अथॉरिटी फॉर अप्रूविंग ऑफ द बजट इज स्टेट गवर्नमेंट रिस्पेक्टिव। जी सर।
जनाब डॉक्टर काजी साहब ने बहुत ही डिटेल में और बहुत अच्छी तरीके से एलेबोरेटली एक्सप्लेन किया कि अकाउंट्स कैसे मेंटेन किए जा रहे हैं और अकाउंट्स का ऑडिट कैसे किया जा रहा है, और जब अकाउंट्स ऑडिट हो जाते हैं तो 1 साल का अकाउंट फाइनल है, उन अकाउंट्स को स्टेट गवर्नमेंट कैसे जो है फाइनल करती है, क्योंकि फाइनल क्लियरेंस तो स्टेट गवर्नमेंट देती है, क्योंकि कुछ भी अगर कोई कमियां हुई तो फिर स्टेट गवर्नमेंट जो है बोर्ड से एक्शन लेने के लिए कहेगी। और ये जो प्रोसीजर है वो इसी से बजट भी बनता है, क्योंकि जब 1 साल का अकाउंट हमारे सामने है तो अगले साल का बजट बनाने में आसानी होती है कि कितना एक्सपेक्टेड है रिसीट और कितना एक्सपेक्टेड है पेमेंट्स। तो इस तरीके से अकाउंट्स के बारे में हमारे डॉक्टर साहब ने आज हमारे पार्टिसिपेंट्स को तो बहुत अच्छी तरीके से बताया है, और मैं समझता हूं कि इतनी अच्छी मैकेनिज्म है तो कोई गड़बड़ी नहीं होनी चाहिए, लेकिन फिर भी कुछ प्रॉब्लम आती हैं और वो ह्यूमन प्रॉब्लम है, और ह्यूमन प्रॉब्लम को ह्यूमन ढंग से ही उसको टैकल किया जा सकता है। तो इन्हीं लफ्जों के साथ मैं डॉक्टर काजी का शुक्रिया अदा करता हूं, अपने ज़कात फाउंडेशन ऑफ इंडिया और महाराष्ट्र वक्फ लिबरेशन एंड प्रोटेक्शन टास्क फोर्स, और मैं अपनी तरफ से डॉक्टर साहब का तहे दिल से शुक्रिया अदा करता हूं कि खास तौर पे अकाउंट्स वाले पार्ट्स को इतना एलेबोरेटली और अच्छी तरीके से समझाया है कि मैं समझता हूं कि किसी को कोई डाउट नहीं होना चाहिए। इसके साथ ही साथ कुछ और भी प्रोविजन शुरू में बताए हैं, और वो समझिए कि रिमाइंडर थे जो कि स्लाइड्स के जरिए बताया है। इन्हीं लफ्जों के साथ मैं डॉक्टर साहब का दोबारा शुक्रिया अदा करता हूँ। जज़ाकल्लाह, शुक्रिया, अस्सलाम वालेकुम।
वालेकुम अस्सलाम व रहमतुल्लाहि व बरकातुहू। मुझे भी आप लोगों ने मौका दिया, इस बहाने ये मेरा फील्ड नहीं था, लेकिन चूंकि मैं ऑडिट एंड अकाउंट से रिलेटेड था, इसलिए जितना कॉमन सेंस पॉइंट, मैंने आज तक किसी वक्फ बोर्ड को विजिट नहीं किया, उसके बावजूद कोशिश किया वो समझाने की। बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया साहब।
बहुत अच्छा है, बहुत अच्छा है।
अल्लाह हाफिज। ओके सर, अल्लाह।
2:30 पे मिलते हैं दोबारा, 2:30 पे मिलते हैं।
2:30